I'm refutating the speech that abortion should be legal, and his claim is fact or whatever is that it's not legal in the United States, which in fact it is. It has been legal since 1973 in the Roe versus Wade case, and so that kind of made it hard to refutate something that was true. But one of his biggest claims was that not allowing people to get abortions is bad for women's rights and their body as well. But that's not necessarily true because he says that not having them takes away their women's rights to their bodies, but they have rights to their bodies in the first place because they're the ones having sex. And if we took away women's rights to their bodies, then they wouldn't be able to have the sex in the first place. Then they wouldn't have the baby and have to have the abortion. And he said that it's unethical for the government to force them to keep the kids, or to have the kids, but the government's not forcing them to keep the kids, they're just forcing them to have them and to not abort them. And there are plenty of other ways to have a kid and not actually have to keep it. Like abortion is available for absolutely everyone who doesn't want a kid. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. But they also, in almost every single state in California, in the United States, it is legal to drop off a newborn baby in front of a fire station or a hospital. And there have been several different incidences where people have found babies in dumpsters and trash cans and all that, and the state still tries to save the kids even though they don't know how they got there or why they're there. He also says that it would help the economy if we abort children, because if the parents say they do have a kid and then they want it, they don't abort it, they decide against it and then they keep it, then they're going to have to pay for that kid until they're 18 or until they can support themselves. But that's not necessarily true because they don't have to keep the kid in the first place. And there's 1.5 million abortions in the U.S., but there's 2.5 million deaths in the U.S. every year, and that's from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, and that was a survey that they did in 2006. So there's more people dying every year than there are being killed. So it's not. So the numbers don't really add up when you think about it, because there's still going to be because say if those people weren't aborted and those 1.5 million people were alive still, then that would still make up for the loss that we had of that year. And he says that it would help the economy, but by the time that those kids who say they weren't aborted and then they did grow up and they did semi-have loving homes or they did get jobs or something, by the time that they are able to work, the economy would be out of the slump that it's in right now, because the way that history has gone, it's I think it's every 5 or 10 years that the economy goes up and down. So by the time those kids are able to work, then the economy will be up, and then they could essentially be helping our economy, because that's just more people that can be working. And abortions are allowed. Actually, abortions are allowed in okay, hold on. Okay, the places that abortions are not allowed, there are places there are exceptions to them. Mainly the exceptions are abortions that are due to rape, or prevent pregnancies that are due to rape, health purposes, or incest, and those are legal in the states, because those aren't those people obviously didn't want those kids, they obviously didn't try to have those kids, and so they will let those abortions happen, but those are only special circumstances. And abortions are legal in a quarter of the world, one of the United States being a part of that big quarter. So the fact that he's trying to say that abortions should be illegal, just in the United States alone doesn't really count, because they are. And the places that they are illegal, they shouldn't be legal. And that's it.
Refute, not refutate.
So,
So that's just one of those little things that becomes an issue. You ID the secondary claims. Well, basically, you identify what the topic is, and you start talking about the secondary claims when you're discussing rights. But you seem to be bouncing between making an argument that says there is no dispute on this because women have this right, so I don't know what he's challenging, versus saying, well, you know, we have alternatives to abortion, so we don't really need it. And I think you need to clarify either what position you're going to take or explain why both positions are not contradictory, because it just seems confusing when you keep going back and forth between those issues. You know, at one point you say there's no limit on access to abortion. In fact, they could drop off the kids after they're born. I'm going, okay, so people don't necessarily have to suffer any consequence if they do have, if they don't have an abortion. But then you kind of come back to the issue. These people are apparently dropping off their kids because they chose not to have abortions, not because they were prevented from having abortions. That's the first thing that you mentioned, the 1973 ruling that created the right to abortion. The economic issue got very confusing. I'm not exactly sure what the impact of any of your arguments is going to be. You've got a statistic there that says we've got 2.5 million people dying a year, 1.5 million abortions. So I guess the idea is that we still would be reducing the size of our population if all of those people were born instead of aborted. And what impact that has on the economy, I'm not sure. One of the things that hasn't been talked about is what's the number of births that are actually included in that, and so that might change the numbers also. It's really not clear. And then you get involved in a discussion of the current economic slump. This makes sense if the argument is there'll be a shortage of workers, or there isn't a shortage of workers, or we have too many workers, but I don't know what the premise of this argument is. So it just kind of covers the issue, but I think you're spinning your wheels on that particular point. And then we get to the argument about how there are exceptions on abortions for rape and incest. I'm going, wait a second. Are there any states that prohibit abortion for any reason other than rape and incest? You don't give us any examples of that. In fact, that contradicts the argument that you have up above. There might be a value argument that says that would be a legitimate exception to abortion if we were to have those restrictions, but that's not the point that you seem to be making. So once again, I think it's kind of circling around on the issue instead of getting to the crux of what's in dispute on this point. All right, thank you.